Hello everybody and welcome back to Bad Luck Garage and to video 2 in our series on installing nitrous in our C5 project, the Chinavette. As always, I want to say before we start, if you like this video, don't forget to click the thumbs up button, share it with a friend, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell for updates. If you saw the first video, you know we got all our plumbing done in the first video, so this one's going to be more about wiring and just some little odds and ends. If you haven't seen that video, there should be a link at the end of this video that you can click on and go back and watch the first video, or just go to the Chinavette budget Corvette project and you know, you can watch all the videos there. There are also playlists for the Turbo C10, playlists for tuning tips, playlists for LS swap tips. You get it, guys. There's separate playlists for everything, and for everything there's a playlist. So okay guys, on with the show. Now what I wanted to do really quick is give you guys just a little rundown on the basics of wiring up a nitrous system. So what I'm going to do first, since we're using the Lsx box, is I'm going to show you, how you're going to wire this up with the Lsx kit. Hoping that I can make this, kind of simple and laid out. It really is simple, guys. I mean, when you start overthinking it, it seems kind of complicated, but it's not. So first we're going to do the Lsx system, and then I'm going to show you, what you would need to reap the same benefits with just a basic solenoid system, which is what I have here in the background. So pay no attention to this stuff right now. Now, I do happen to have some short pieces of wire that we'll use just for demonstrative purposes, but basically, here's what's going on. In your simplest form with the Lsx kit, you won't use a window switch. The Lsx kit actually has a TPS sensor built into it, TPS switch, so it'll only activate under wide open throttle. So, barring your window switch, which you really should use, an RPM activated window switch, here's how you're going to hook it up, guys. You are going to have a wire coming from a switched 12 volt source, so we'll call this switch 12 volt. You're going to plug it in to your number 1 slot on your switch here. You're going to plug a ground in to this end here, and all that's for is to illuminate the switch when you turn it on and off. If you don't have an illuminated switch, then it just makes it even easier. From your switch, you are not going to directly power your nitrous system. I'm not going to lie, I've done it that way when I was doing a temporary setup, just to avoid some hassle, but it does put an amperage draw on your switch 12 volt, so you just want to use this as a trigger. So we're going switch 12 volt to our switch. We're going out from our switch to a relay. On your relay, you have terminal 86 and terminal 85. Now, terminal 86 is your trigger. Terminal 85 is directly across from it. It is your ground. Don't pay attention to this red wire in the middle. We're not even using that. Okay? So you're going to go from your main switch to terminal 86, and then terminal 85 is a ground. So what's going to happen is when you flip your switch on, it's going to power up this relay. Now, terminal 30, which is right here in the front here, and it is all labeled on top of your relay. Terminal 30 is going to go to your battery, to a constant hot source, okay? And that leaves terminal 87, which is your very back lead here, all right? This is the wire that is actually going to supply power to your solenoids, or in this case, your Lsx unit. So here's the flow, guys. Switch 12 volt to your switch. When you flip this switch on, it sends power through terminal 80, what was it, 86? Yeah, through terminal 86, grounds out through terminal 85. That bridges the gap between terminal 30, which is hooked to your battery, and terminal 87, and that energizes your, well, whatever you've got tied here to terminal 87. Now on our Lsx control unit, this red wire right here, our power for our unit, that would be tied to terminal 87. That's the wire that we're going to power up. And our Lsx ground here, that's just going to get tied to a common ground. The Lsx unit actually has a built-in lead to read your TPS sensor to activate the system. So this lead from the TPS to the TPS sensor, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to find which wire off your throttle position sensor, which wire has a varying load. It should be like, you know, around 5 volts max, and it should go up and down as you move the throttle. So I'm going to have to do that before I hook it up, but for now I'm going to keep explaining what we got going on here. With the Lsx system, with nothing else hooked up, once you turn it on, you're energizing it. As soon as this wire sees wide open throttle on your throttle position sensor, it engages the nitrous. Seems like a pretty good system, right? Well, it is. There's just one problem, and that problem is you never want to engage your nitrous at low RPM. And by low RPM, I mean right off idle. You want to make sure cylinder pressure is low. When you're first accelerating, your cylinder pressure is extremely high. That's not a good time to activate the nitrous. You generally, the rule of thumb, guys, is around 3,000 RPM is when you want the nitrous to kick on, and that's where our window switch comes into play. You need to make a note too, I forgot to mention, you do want to always put a fuse in line between your battery and terminal 30 there. So, you know, you're going to go from terminal 30 to a fuse, then to your battery. But here is where the window switch comes into play, guys. What we're going to do with the window switch is we're actually going to wire the window switch in between our main turn on and terminal 86, okay? The reason you don't want to wire your window switch in between, I'm going to stop referring to terminals and just refer to the wires because we know where these wires are going now. But the reason you don't want to wire your window switch in up here is because most window switches are not meant to hold a lot of load. So unless your window switch says that it's rated to handle load, you know, a lot of load, you want to use the window switch in between this switch and your relay, and still let the relay hold the load of your solenoid or your fuel management unit, you know, like we have with the Lsx module. So that's where your window switch goes. It's going to get wired in between here. Every window switch is different, guys. This is actually an Intellitronics unit that I bought that never worked. Well, I had my buddy check it out, and apparently there was something in here that wasn't soldered properly or something, and he thinks he's got it fixed. So we're going to try it out again, but yeah, we had issues with this from day one. But the color coding and everything on the window switches, you know, depending on manufacturers, that's all going to be different. So it's kind of pointless for me to show you how that's wired in. But basically what's going to happen with the window switch is you're going to have a power, ground, a tack signal lead that you're going to have to hook up to your tack signal so that it can read RPM, and then an output signal. Guys, I really hope I'm not making this confusing because it really shouldn't be. I'm doing my best to not make this confusing. But as you can see, you know, with the Lsx unit, you really don't need a bunch of extra stuff. The only thing I recommend getting extra with the Lsx unit is a window switch. And I do want to say this. When you run your wire between your main turn on, your trigger here, when you run your wire to your window switch and to this, you do have to program the Lsx unit to work with your individual throttle position sensor. So two ways of doing that. If you've got a window switch, like I believe this is supposed to have a feature where you can just leave it on all the time. You can set it to just be on. You can do that, or you know what you could do is you could just wire it in the way we had it, turn the unit on. You've got to hold a button on the side of the ZEX unit while somebody holds the throttle all the way, or works the throttle all the way open and closed, and you know, the light will start flashing and let you know that it's programmed. Once that's done, then you can go back and permanently wire in your window switch in between here. What I want to do now is move on to what we need to do to wire up a basic system like this. This is where it gets a little more complicated, not much. And I do want to say, you know, I know some people watching this video, you know, you may just be watching it for entertainment instead of learning. You may have done this stuff before. There are different ways to wire up everything, guys, so I'm showing you the way I do it. And this is a good example. This wide open throttle switch probably can handle the load of a solenoid. So the way I'm showing you to wire it up is not the way everybody wires it up. Anyway, that being said, we no longer have our ZEX system. Now what we have is a separate fuel and nitrous solenoid, which means we no longer have our little computer box to tell us when we're at wide open throttle and activate the nitrous. So there are multiple ways to go about doing this, and here is the old school way that we used to do it back when I was 20 years old. Okay, guys, we would have, once again, our main power lead right here coming from a switch 12 volt ignition. Then we would have a push button. We would mount this push button either on our shifter or on our steering wheel. Okay, this lead right here going through this button, one end of it would go to our main power switch. The other end of it would go to complete the circuit to our relay. Nothing else changes after that. We got the relay grounded here. We got the relay going through a fuse to our battery here, and then this wire goes out and splits and activates both our solenoids. So we've got a power and a ground on our solenoid. Does not matter which way you hook it up, guys. That's why there's not a black and a red wire or anything. Your solenoid wires, one of them is going to go to ground. The other ones are going to get tied together and come to this wire to be activated. So then what you have is, when you're ready to race, you flip this switch on. That gives you, you know, trigger power, but it's all running through this button right here, guys. So you're in full control. We would take off, we'll get up to about 3,000 RPM, hit this button, and as long as you hold this button down, it's going to keep shooting nitrous, keep shooting the extra fuel. Okay, that was the way we used to do it back in the day before we had fancy gadgets. Now we've got fancy gadgets. So obviously we do not have a wide open throttle switch built in here, so that's where this guy steps in. This is a wide open throttle switch. This one's actually made by Holley, and I am going to put links to all this stuff in the video description, guys, just to make it easier for you to find on eBay. But what we would do now, and this is where the way people hook stuff up varies. Now you can either tie this in here and then bring your power wires for your solenoids and tie it into the other end here together. And then what you have to do is you have to find somewhere to mount this where your throttle is going to flip this switch when you go wide open. Now on a carburetor, you know, you can usually bend brackets and whatnot and make the carburetor linkage. You want to adjust this to where it does not connect until, you know, the carburetor is wide open. All right. On a cable activated throttle body, same thing. You can usually make brackets, bend this around to where, you know, when your little moon with your throttle cable comes in and it makes contact and hits that at wide open throttle. Now things get a little tricky when you're trying to use this on a drive-by-wire car. In that case, what you usually end up having to do, guys, is mount this inside the car. And that's where the way I wire it comes into play. Because you're going to want to mount this, you're going to have to make a bracket to mount this behind your accelerator pedal. So that this is actually going to be under your dash, and when your pedal comes down, the metal rod on your pedal is going to contact this and click it. Like I said, you're going to have to get creative. You're going to have to make a bracket to, you know, have this exactly where you need it. You have this, you no longer need this guy. So we get rid of the whole push button thing, and we're back to being activated at wide open throttle. So like I said, if you have to mount this in the car, then it's probably going to be easier to mount it right here between your main switch and your relay trigger wire. So at that point, you're going to have a wire coming out of your switch. We don't have to be super accurate here, guys. Out of your switch, going into this switch, and then this wire is going to come out of your wide open throttle switch to here. Your gas pedal is going to activate this, and it's going to fire up the relay, which is going to fire up your solenoids, because they're going to be tied to here. Once again, enter the Windows switch. So at this point, what we're doing is we are going from here to our wide open throttle switch, to our Windows switch, and back out to our trigger wire. So, you know, basically this is taking the place of the Lsx control unit, but, you know, where the Lsx control unit would be mounted to this, you know, you're having to put all this in line here. I hope that makes sense, guys. I really hope that makes sense. It's making sense in my head. I really hope I'm getting the message across to you guys, but for right now, none of this is really relevant to our setup on the Corvette, because we are using the Lsx unit. So really all we need to get this thing going is this relay, a fuse, and our Intellitronics RPM activated window switch that hopefully works now. Those of you who managed to stay awake through all of that, I apologize. You know, I've been getting a lot of questions over the last few weeks, and I was trying to explain everything to people who don't know, and I know I get long-winded. Anyway, you are about to watch me commit all kinds of atrocities here that I just told you not to commit, because here's the deal, guys. If you haven't been following the channel, if you just happen to find this video recently, then what you don't know is that I'm actually building a relay panel. We're going to do that in an upcoming video, and everything's going to be tied into that relay panel. My window switch, everything's going to be mounted there. So for now, what I'm doing, I just want to race this car this weekend, so I'm doing a quickie job. So basically, all I'm going to do is I'm going to wire in my relay, no window switch, and my TPS wire from my Lsx unit. And basically what's going to happen is I'm just going to, once I get up to about 2800 RPMs, I'm just going to flip the system on. That's, like I said, this is just temporary, and that's why you're about to see me do all kinds of crazy junk, like use butt connectors out here, because all this is temporary, guys. This is going to be on here for like a week. But anyway, power source on the side of our fuse box here. If you pop this off, you have a power lug that comes from your battery. So that's where we're going to, I've actually already put a little connector on here. We're going to loosen this up, shove this on here, tighten it back down to power our relay here. And then just like I showed you guys, this end will actually go to power our Lsx unit. This end will go to ground. This will go from our signal wire, which is right here. Now, again, if you guys haven't been following the channel, we actually hooked up an entire nitrous control center in the car. You might want to go back and watch that video, because that's where all these wires are coming from. Okay, we got wires for bottle heaters, bottle openers, a second stage of nitrous, you know, That's where all these wires are coming from, guys. And once I build the relay panel, we'll be hooking all this up permanent. But for now, we're just doing a temp job. So I don't know if you guys even want to see this. So before anybody scolds me too bad, just remember this is temporary, guys. And you'll see in an upcoming video, I'm going to show you guys how to build a relay fuse panel for, like, well, for a race car. But show you guys how to build that, and at that point we'll be redoing all this correctly, and all the wires from our switch panel will be here. Again, if you haven't seen the video where I installed the switch panel and showed how to run the wires and all that, you may want to go back and check that video out. You know, the Lsx unit is going to make sure that the nitrous only engages at wide open throttle. We're actually about to find our wire to tap into for our throttle position sensor, but I am going to be controlling when it comes on RPM wise. So what'll happen is, once I go wide open throttle, when I get up to about 2800 RPMs, I'm going to go ahead and flick that switch. It's going to kick on because it's going to know I'm at wide open throttle. But then when I get to the end of the track, when I let out of the throttle, the Lsx unit will go ahead and shut the nitrous off for me because I'm no longer at wide open throttle. And at that point, you know, I can just reach down and flip the switch off. But I've actually wired my switch from in the car there. I've wired it to the relay just like I showed you guys. And I've got my relay wire right here on this hot lug, which we are now going to cover up. And you can see the power and ground from the Lsx unit. I've just kind of got them wrapped around here for now, running in the side. When I go to do the permanent install, we'll, you know, of course we'll use wire loom, and I'll bring them around a little more neatly up from the bottom. We'll have our nice panel here. But for now, what I've got to do is I've actually got to hook the battery back up now, so I can use a multimeter and figure out what wire I need to tap into for my TPS signal. Okay guys, so what I have done is I've went ahead, turned the key forward, checked for fuel leaks. I had no fuel leaks, so I went ahead and put that cover on. Now I'm trying to locate my wire for my throttle position sensor. So I went up here where the throttle position sensor is. I looked at all the different color wires, and they follow the wiring harness back here. So now what I'm doing is I have the wife in the car. I think I have the right wire. What you're looking for, as I said earlier, is a wire that the voltage varies from, you know, say 1 to 5 volts as the throttle pedal is depressed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have her turn the key forward, and I'm going to show you guys on the multimeter what's going to happen if you're on the right wire. Turn the key forward. Now you can see the wire that I'm on, which in my case is a dark blue wire. It's showing 1.13 volts. Now push the throttle, honey. And when she pushes the throttle pedal, it jumps up. Do it again. Hold it down, please. So it jumps up to 4.37. So that's the wire we need to tap into, guys. Okay, and now that we have the correct wire, we just need to tap into it for our Lsx unit here, or if you're using another kind of wide open throttle digital switch. And the way I like to do this is with a T-tap or a quick connect. I'm sorry, a quick tap. There's a lot of different names for this, guys, but basically what happens is this crimps over the wire and it creates a female for a male terminal to plug into. So it's real easy to disconnect if for some reason you need to disconnect it or plug something else into it. Now, sometimes you might not get a good connection with these. Some people don't like using these. I've never had a problem with them. Done this so many times, it's stupid. But anyway, guys, if you don't want to use one of these, you can always just cut the insulation back, wrap your wire around it, and solder it. Me, I like to be able to disconnect stuff in a hurry if I need to for whatever reason. So I'm just going to use one of these. Then we'll kind of wrap our loom back up a little bit here and put our cover on, since we've already checked for leaks. So after I put my quick tap on, I went ahead and just stuck a male connector in there, checked with my multimeter again, and made sure that I was still getting that signal. So now what I can do is go ahead and I plugged in my Lsx unit, my lead for the TPS sensor. So now I can go ahead, put my cover back on, and we can program our nitrous management unit here to read this particular TPS sensor. Hey guys, so programming the unit is actually pretty easy. Just turn your key on, turn on your switch to arm the system, press this button, and you'll see a solid red light. So you want to go back in your car, push the accelerator all the way to the floor and hold it there for 10 seconds. At that point, you're going to see that you now have a flashing red and green light. That means it is programmed. You can now turn the system off, then turn it back on, and this green light means it's all programmed. Now the way to test this is actually to hit the accelerator a few times, and you know, you should if you've got everything hooked up, it should be spraying some nitrous and some fuel out. Obviously you don't want to do that with the nozzle mounted in the vehicle. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to unhook my lines, have my daughter hit the gas pedal and see if it sprays out. Now that was actually air on that side and through the line back, and over here on the rack we have gasoline where it was injecting our gasoline. So I think we're good, guys. She is hooked up and ready to go, ready to rock. Everything's wired up. Like I said, not gonna run the RPM switch this weekend just because I have other stuff to do. But what I am gonna do, I still have to fix the vacuum leak for the heater. So I'm about to pull this wheel off video, go in here, and while I'm fixing that, I'm going to find pin 10, which should be my tachometer output from the PCM. I'm going to find that. I'll go ahead and tap into it, run a wire up into here, so when I do the relay panel in a future video, I'll be able to go ahead and hook up that RPM window switch. For now, I'm sure this video is running long, so I just want to talk about a few more things before I end. So the install's finished, except for a few things that I either can't hook up yet because I don't have, or I'm waiting to do the relay panel because I don't want to hook some stuff up twice. But I want to kind of go through and answer some things that some of you have asked me over the last couple weeks. So first off, let's start with jetting, guys, because one of the questions I was asked is, why do different manufacturers recommend different size jets for the same size nitrous shot? Different manufacturers base their jetting on different amounts of bottle pressure, guys. Lsx, for example, they use the baseline of 950 psi bottle pressure. I haven't looked at my instructions, but I think NX uses 1050. Some of them even use 1200. I mean, they want you to run really high bottle pressure. Well, of course, the higher the bottle pressure, the more nitrous that's going to come through the same size jet. So that's why a company like Lsx that recommends 950 psi bottle pressure may use a slightly larger nitrous jet to achieve the same horsepower level as a company like NX that recommends 1050 psi bottle pressure. So when you're talking about, say, 100 shot, Lsx may recommend using a 46 jet because of the lower bottle pressure it recommends, whereas NX might recommend a 47, or I'm sorry, might recommend a 44 or 45 for that same 100 horsepower shot. Now, on the flip side of that, with the fueling, the size of the jet is going to be recommended based on your fuel pressure in kind of the same way. So if the system you have is designed for an LS engine that runs 58 psi fuel pressure, it's going to take a lot smaller of a fuel jet than if you're running an older system that runs on 43 psi of fuel pressure. So if you try to use the same jet from a 43 psi system in a 58 psi system, you're going to go way rich. And along those same lines, I want to reflect back to what I said, I think it was in the last video, about sometimes the jet you have isn't the jet you want. And what I mean by that is, guys, you got to realize most of these beginner nitrous kits, they're intended for people who don't know anything about nitrous, and the manufacturer wants you to be safe. So a lot of the times what they'll do is they will jet it super rich. So if they recommend a 45, or I'm sorry, if they recommend like we just used a 28, number 28 fuel jet, that might actually have you running at like, you know, high 10s, low 11 AFRs, when you actually want to kind of try to keep it in the, you know, you want to try to keep your nitrous AFRs. It's not like turbo guys where you got to go super rich. You can try to keep your AFRs on the bottle pretty close to the same level that you have it off the bottle. But for that reason, you know, the manufacturers are gonna, in their kits, they're gonna force it to run a little bit on the rich side just to be safe for you. But what you can do is you can buy other jets, and, you know, say you're running a 10.5 AFR with a 28 fuel jet, you might want to step up to a 30, or, you know, or a 29. But what I like to do is I like to buy extra jets and play around within that 2 or 3 jet up or down range. Like I said, generally you're going to be running rich if you use the manufacturer's suggested jetting. Another thing you can do is up your bottle pressure, guys. You know, you're going to make a little more horsepower, and with the same jetting, you're going to run just a little bit leaner than you would under the manufacturer's recommended bottle pressure. And I did not tell you to do that just now, did I? Okay, I didn't say that, but yeah, guys, and the way you regulate bottle pressure, moving on to that, the way you regulate bottle pressure is actually with a heater. Yes, I'm guilty of trying to heat a bottle with a torch. It's not a safe thing to do. No nitrous manufacturer recommends it. Yes, I have done it. I'm going to try not to do it this time. But the issue I have, guys, is I just ordered a bottle warmer. And I actually had a bottle warmer. I sold it a couple years ago. But I just ordered one. Because what I've realized is, as cold as it is right now, my bottle pressure, even with about 6 pounds of nitrous in this bottle, my pressure's only at 600 psi. So I'm not really expecting a lot from the system. What's going to happen is when I engage the nitrous, instead of 100 shot, it's going to feel more like probably a 60 or 70 shot, and it's going to be running really rich. But anyway, yeah, a bottle heater, guys, that's the safest way and the most effective way to regulate your bottle pressure. The warmer you get the bottle, the higher the pressure will be, and as the nitrous starts running lower, the bottle temperature is going to have to be raised higher and higher to maintain that same PSI in the bottle. Now, timing. Someone asked me to go over timing in part 1, and so I'm going to do that now. Here's the deal with timing, guys. Ideally, you do not want to tune your car on nitrous until it's tuned off the nitrous. So what you want to do is you want to tune your car to peak performance, or I like to tune a little below peak performance, not run it on the ragged edge. But you want to tune your car off the bottle first, and, you know, get your timing set the way you want it off the bottle first. Now, any nitrous manufacturer you see is going to recommend that you retard the timing 2 degrees for every 50 horsepower shot of nitrous. Here's the thing with that, guys. They are assuming that your car has already been tuned to peak performance. Now, in my experience, when you're running, like, say, a 100 shot, anything below that, if you're on the stock tune, if your car hasn't been maximized, you really don't need to worry about retarding the timing unless you're seeing some knock, and you should always data log and look for that knock. But if you're running on a stock tune, 9 times out of 10, that first 100 shot, you're going to be fine with the stock timing, guys. Now, disclaimer, if you blow your shit up because you thought you were on stock time and turns out you bought a car that was already tuned, I am not taking responsibility for that. You know, you need to always check, and that's why I recommend usually going with like a 75 shot on a V8 starting out. Look for knock retard in your tune, or I mean in your data logs. If you don't see any, jet it up to 100. If you start seeing knock retard, then that's when you need to start pulling time in. And I don't recommend pulling a lot at once. Like, you know, if you're only seeing 1 degree of knock retard, pull 1 degree of timing there, guys. But you know, it's just like any other tuning you do with the car. Start low, work your way up, okay? I just wanted to give you an example. If you go way back and watch the Project Steppenwolf video, when I put the nitrous on right before we did the turbo build, when I was at the track, you know, we ran I think I ran 100, 125, 150 shot, all on the same day there. We just kept jetting it up. I never changed the timing, guys. I was running, if I remember correctly, about 26 to 28 degrees of timing on that 6-liter LQ4, and I never saw the first bit of knock, even on the 150 shot. So I never did pull timing. Hope that pretty much covers all your questions. I do want to say, as far as hooking up the window switch, hooking up the bottle warmer, eventually switching to the NX kit, wherever I put it, eventually switching to that and hooking up a progressive controller, that's all going to be covered in upcoming videos, guys. You know, as I get the stuff, as I start installing it, then you know, of course you guys are going to come along for the ride. I don't know if it'll be really detailed. I'll probably do a really detailed video on the progressive controller, but I've already kind of explained how to hook up a window switch. And the bottle warmer is just real simple, guys. You know, your on-off switch to the relay, back to the bottle warmer, and then the ground coming off the bottle warmer. You're going to want to run a pressure switch on your bottle and put that in line with the ground. So I mean, I don't really think that needs its own video, but if you feel like it does, let me know and I'll make a video just on hooking up a bottle warmer. It's seriously, it's like 2 wires, guys. It's, you know, no big deal. But the important thing is we have our setup kind of rigged up for this weekend. I am going to be the RPM switch this weekend, but as soon as I finish getting all the parts together for the relay panel, I'll do the video, show you guys how to build a relay panel. At that point, we'll start hooking up all my accessories for the nitrous, and that's pretty much it, guys. I'm happy as hell. I'm going to do this little vacuum line thing off camera, but I'm happy as hell. The car's ready to go. I fired it up a couple times. Hopefully tomorrow night we can get out to the track, maybe do a little tuning on it, NA first, and then you know, maybe put a little squeeze to it. So with that being said, if you like this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, share it with a friend, subscribe to the channel, and guys, if you subscribe, don't forget to click that little notification bell. That way you get notifications whenever I put out a new video and you don't miss any. So until next time, get out in the garage, get something done, and I'll see you next time here on Bad Luck Garage.